So today we're going to talk about the citric acid cycle. The whole point of the citric acid cycle is to make ATP. Remember that sugars will be converted into pyruvate. The pyruvate is converted into acetyl-CoA, and acetyl-CoA is the molecule that enters the citric acid cycle. So we have sugars being converted to pyruvate. Fats are automatically converted into acetyl-CoA, and so they will immediately be able to enter the citric acid cycle. But once the acetyl-CoA is created, the acetyl-CoA will be converted into citrate by citrate synthase, and then citrate is converted into cis-aconitate by aconitase. Deisocitrate then is made, and so on and so forth. The enzymes are all these guys in maroon that end in ASE. And the products, each step has a specific product. Sometimes the product is only what's found in the actual cycle. But a lot of times, these enzymes have other products. Like here, isocitrate dehydrogenase is making NADH and CO2. Now, since we're talking about making ATP, there's no ATP actually made in the citric acid cycle. The citric acid cycle does, however, make things that turn into ATP. So we're making 3 NADH. So we have 1 at isocitrate dehydrogenase, we have 1 at alpha ketoglutarate dehydrogenase, and 1 at malate dehydrogenase. We're making 1 FADH2 right here at succinic dehydrogenase, and we're making 1 GTP. Now, depending on the sources you see, in NADH, sometimes they say NADH makes 3 ATP, sometimes they make 2.5 ATP. I'm just going to say 3 to make it easy. So we get 3 ATP for each NADH. That's 9 ATP from NADH. FADH2 can make 2 ATP, and the 1 GTP is easily converted to ATP, which gives us a total of 12 ATP per cycle. Now, when sugar is broken down, typically through glycolysis, glycolysis results in 2 pyruvate molecules. Those 2 pyruvates will each turn into 2 acetyl-CoAs, which means a sugar results in 2 different molecules going through the cycle, and each molecule is going to make those 12 ATP. Fats, though, it depends on the length of the fat. If it's a 16 carbon fat, that means 8 acetyl-CoAs. And so 8 trips through the citric acid cycle. Sugar is always 2 CoAs, acetyl-CoAs. So that's kind of the main parts of the story about the citric acid cycle. Now, if we were to look at since it is a cycle, it really is a factory. The citric acid cycle is a factory. And when there's any break in a factory line, maybe somebody calls in sick. Well, in order for the factory to continue working, somebody else has to replace the person who's called in sick. So, if any enzyme in the citric acid cycle stops working, the body is like, uh-oh, there's a break in my citric acid cycle. What's going to happen in my amount of ATP made? Well, let's say citrate synthase wasn't working. If citrate synthase wasn't working, citrate wouldn't be made. If citrate isn't made, also CoA wouldn't be made. So you can see the acetyl-CoA gets converted into CoA. and we make citrate. So we have these side products that wouldn't get made, and we have the product that's part of the actual cycle that doesn't get made. Well, obviously, if citrate isn't made, then the next enzyme can't do his job, the next enzyme can't do his job, and so on and so forth. If CoA isn't made, then a new acetyl-CoA wouldn't be able to be made. So it's super important that the side product is made just as much as it's important that the actual product in the cycle is made. So you can think of this as how if a defect were to prevent ATP production, there's a few different ways. First of all, it would be how it would affect the enzyme's ability to function within the cycle, but also we have to look at the ability of the electron transport chain to convert these guys into these 12 ATP. If the electron transport chain doesn't have access to an NADH, the electron transport chain isn't going to be able to make 3 ATPs out of it. So there's lots of things to think about in how important it is that each enzyme is able to do its job. Okay, I hope that explained